this video, we need to go through what alcohol is. Now, I'm willing to bet you've heard of alcohol, but what is the chemical part of it? How does your body deal with it? How does it process it? That's what we need to look at and see how the body responds once alcohol is consumed. All right, so alcohol. What really is alcohol? Well, it's a class of chemicals that are all going to have a similar formula. Now, this similar formula is going to be made by the process of fermentation. But since this is nutrition and not chemistry, we kind of need to make sure that we deal with what's the nutritional side of it, which means we're going to focus on ethanol. So for the purpose of our discussion, alcohol is ethanol. That's the one type of alcohol we're looking at because that's what the human body can consume. Now, ethanol itself, alcohol, basically this has been used for countless different cultures, countless different societies, for many different purposes. Sometimes it was used as more of a religious rite. It was used for more ceremonial purposes, celebratory purposes, even medicinal purposes. In the case of medicinal, we're looking at both the mental help as well as the physical help. So over the years, it's been used for both. But consuming too much alcohol, so consuming in excess, can become very problematic and very quickly sometimes. So according to the CDC, their guidelines for what moderation is of alcohol consumption, they state that 1 drink per day for a female and 2 drinks per day for a male is considered moderation. Now, for the purposes of this video, anytime we talk about moderation versus excess, we're referring back to those CDC guidelines. So 1 drink females, 2 drinks males. But the reason we need to talk about this is because alcohol is considered a psychoactive drug. Now, really, what is a psychoactive drug? Well, what that means is it can easily be absorbed into the bloodstream. And because it's easily absorbed and it can pass through the blood-brain barrier, there's a lot of different effects this can have on the body. And if you're thinking, oh, blood-brain barrier, your brain has a special blood flow going around it that has certain limitations of what can get through and what can't get through. That's the blood-brain barrier. Alcohol can pass right through. So alcohol, because of this psychoactive effect, can impact behavior, it can impact speech, it can impact motor control, memory, social interactions. I mean, a huge list of what could be interactive. Now, this interactiveness with the body having so much be impacted changes from person to person. Sometimes individuals might not see much of any motor deterioration initially. They might have more of the cognitive, more of the memory deterioration to start with. Might have more of the speech deterioration. Others, very quickly, the motor deterioration might kick in, but the speech might last a little longer. So there is variation of how the effects of alcohol will play out in each person. So once alcohol is consumed, about 85 to 98% of it is going to be metabolized by the liver. Now there's a range there because, again, that depends on each individual person. Depends on how much they consumed, depends how frequently they consume the alcohol. So there's that range of 85 to 98%. Regardless, though, it's not 100%, which means the other 2 to 15% has to have something else going on. In this case, the other 2 to 15% that's not being metabolized by the liver, that will be dealt with by the kidneys, excretion, sweat excretion, breathing excretion, as well as even the saliva will help to excrete it. Your body's basically just trying to get it out of your system. It doesn't want it in the system. So the liver might be the majority, but several other ways help as well to excrete the alcohol from the system. Now, I mentioned the idea of breath. That's where the breathalyzer comes into play. So I'm sure maybe you've heard of it or you've seen someone have it, where a breathalyzer test is administered and it's trying to figure out how much alcohol is in the system. That's because based on the amount of alcohol in the breath, can estimate how much is in the blood. Basically looking at blood alcohol levels, or blood alcohol content, BAC. The blood alcohol content is the percent of alcohol in the blood. Now, sure, a blood test would be more accurate, but that's pretty invasive compared to just breathing into a device. Hence why breathalyzers are used more than actual blood tests. But this percentage of alcohol in the blood is looking at what your level of intoxication is. For most of the states in the US, 0.08% blood alcohol content is the legal limit for being drunk. Now, below that, there are definitely things that can start to impact the person, but that's the legal limit of where things are looking at. You can go down much lower and have still impaired abilities to judge situations. Motor controls are starting to slow down as you get more and more alcohol in the system. So even if you're below that 0.08, there still is diminished response to special neural pathways. The neurons just aren't firing as quickly through the system. So alcohol from a nutritional standpoint now, so we know what's in the body, but there really isn't any nutritional benefit to alcohol. Sure, there's sugars in alcohol, there's calories there, but there's really no nutritional benefit. The body is simply going to try to get rid of it the minute it enters the body. So it's always trying to clear it out. And from this standpoint, that means that there's really no benefit from a nutritional standpoint to drinking alcohol. Now I keep saying from a nutritional standpoint, because later on in the video, we'll get into there are potential benefits, and we'll discuss that later. But right now, from a nutritional aspect, there's really not much of a caloric benefit unless you're looking for empty calories, which, as we talked about in previous videos, empty calories really aren't very beneficial. You want to make sure your calories are dense with nutrients to help benefit your entire diet. All right, so all this alcohol is going in the system if you choose to drink. Really, about 5%, give or take, maybe 4, maybe 6, it varies, not exactly a number, but give or take about 5% of the alcohol you consume starts to be dealt with and absorbed right in the cells of the GI tract, which means the cells of the oral cavity, the cells of the esophagus, the stomach, they're all starting to take up the alcohol once it reaches those cells. So the rest of the alcohol can then head into the blood and the liver and the rest of the systems. But initially, your GI tract even starts immediately uptaking once alcohol enters the picture. So the vast majority of the alcohol, though, is going to be processed by the liver. So that was only about 5%, so we've got a lot left. In the liver, there are two main pathways. We're going to have one pathway called alcohol dehydrogenase complex. Now, the alcohol dehydrogenase complex is going to deal with the majority of the alcohol metabolism. What's going to happen is this alcohol dehydrogenase complex, this pathway, is going to take the ethanol and is then going to break down the ethanol into acetaldehyde. Now, acetaldehyde is a toxic substance. If you're saying, well, why are we making a toxic substance? That's just the way the pathway is working. So as your body breaks down ethanol, it breaks it down into acetaldehyde. Then your body immediately needs to break that down into acetate. Now, acetate is either going to be excreted or used. If it's excreted, it goes in the bloodstream. The kidneys will then work on excreting it and getting rid of it from the blood. But it could also be used by being put into the citric acid cycle. So you can then take that, pull apart the molecule, and create energy, or ATP, from there. So we have the main pathway being the alcohol dehydrogenase complex. But the key is you gotta make sure you get rid of that acetaldehyde. Now the other pathway in the liver, the one that's not quite as prevalent, is MEOS. Now that stands for microsomal ethanol oxidizing system. MEOS is a whole lot easier. The MEOS pathway is going to deal with about 10 to 15% of the overall metabolism of alcohol. So again, alcohol dehydrogenase, a whole lot more common. MEOS, about 10 to 15%. Now, that 10 to 15% can change depending on the amount of alcohol consumed. Heavy drinking, or someone that consistently drinks heavy, that MEOS system is going to increase to try to compensate for the increased amount of alcohol. But overall, both those pathways are working together. Now, higher consumption of alcohol, a lot of times though, can push those two systems to not keep up. Now, if the systems cannot keep up, they can convert ethanol into acetaldehyde, but that acetaldehyde starts to build up. The liver, the hepatic cells, they just can't keep up and keep processing it fast enough into acetate. Which means as the acetaldehyde, which is toxic, builds up, it starts to damage those hepatic cells, those liver cells. And that damage could become quite problematic if enough of it builds up. But a second issue here, if enough acetaldehyde builds up in the liver cells, it can spill over into the circulatory system, which means your blood can pick it up, and then the blood can transport through the entire body system. If you transport the entire body system, this toxin, this acetaldehyde, is going to have painful results, things like nausea, vomiting. That's why I kind of feel not great overall a lot of times. If it gets in the brain in high enough doses, it can even cause someone to black out completely. So again, this acetaldehyde is not really the best thing to have circulating through your body. And it's all because the hepatic cells, the liver, can't keep up the metabolic process. But still, that's not the whole picture. We still have the kidneys and the other excretory processes. Remember that remaining 2 to 15%? The kidneys will deal with the majority of that. You also have, again, breathing, saliva, sweat. But the kidneys are the main one here. You're saying, well, sure, the kidneys excrete it. True, but there is a catch. While the kidneys are excreting the alcohol, you're also excreting water. Because alcohol is a diuretic. Alcohol is going to inhibit the production of ADH, anti-diuretic hormone. It's part of your endocrine system. That hormone is meant to help regulate how much water you're excreting. Now, alcohol inhibits ADH, which means alcohol is a diuretic. It increases the water flow. That's why I go to the bathroom so often when you're drinking alcohol. All those bathroom trips constantly keep you losing water. You're dehydrating your system. As you keep dehydrating your system, your cells become dehydrated, you're having less blood flow circulation, you have a whole bunch of other problems occurring here. This is where the hangover comes into play. So if you ever have a hangover, headache, not feeling well, potentially vomiting, that vomiting is from the acetaldehyde, but the headache, just the overall not feeling well, the blah, that's more from the dehydration. The loss of water, the loss of electrolytes. So drinking in moderation can avoid all that. Heavy drinking can overpower those pathways, causing the metabolic processes just not to be able to keep up and causing potential damage to the system. So alcohol, what it is and what it does to the system. Until the next video.